Guys, who is this show made for? If you haven't heard of My Adventures with Superman, then don't worry, I got you. The show follows Clark Kent as he learns about his mysterious past, obtains new superpowers, and ultimately falls in love with his timeless sweetheart Lois Lane. The parts of this show that truly shine are its depictions of Superman. Almost every recent depiction of Superman missed the mark in their portrayal of the character. They decide to go with the "I'm Jesus" approach rather than the Superman's more interesting "I'm only human" approach. Remember, Clark was raised as a normal human boy. He lived most of his life as a normal human, treated as a normal human, and has never viewed himself to be greater than human. He's just a normal guy who can also shoot laser beams out of his eyes. The idea of Superman has almost always been rooted in this philosophy. That's why anytime people talk about the movie Superman, it's with this disdain. It's because he was never given his original character trait and was instead thrown into the most surface level adaptation Hollywood could think of. That's where My Adventures of Superman shines. Rather than build Clark Kent around the character of Superman, they instead build Superman around Clark Kent. He's a goofy, likable, good-hearted person just trying to live his life. It's the first time I've seen a good representation of Superman in years. It also comes to no surprise that Jack Quaid, the voice actor of Superman, loves the character. One of the producers even had this to say about it. "We thought we loved Superman, but Jack loves Superman so much. He cares about every line, every emotion, and every episode." The voice actor nails the role of Superman. It really sells the character of Clark Kent. You may have noticed that this show is labeled as My Adventures with Superman, meaning the spotlight isn't only on Superman. The show makes it very clear during the first episode that the story follows Clark Kent, Lois Lane, and Jimmy Olsen. Jimmy Olsen is represented as more of a side character used for lighthearted comedy, but it is possible that they expand on his character in the following episodes. Lois Lane, on the other hand, is a feisty woman who knows what she wants and will get it at all costs. She's written way better than her recent predecessors, and it shows. She's no longer seen as just the love interest, and instead has her own personality traits. She's very much her own character through and through. Another thing I'd like to talk about, since we are still listing the positives of the show, is its art style. The character designs are very reminiscent of She-Ra, which I'm not surprised to learn were both worked on by the same producer. The problem with She-Ra's art was how boring the backgrounds were. I chalked this up to them having a low budget, but I could never get past how boring everything looked. In My Adventures with Superman, they added really nice background art to fill out the world. If I were to put these shows side by side, you'd easily be able to tell which place looks more alive just by its background art alone. With the backgrounds looking fuller and more interesting at a glance, everything else just fits perfectly into place. Clark looks exactly how I would picture him. Lois looks different, but a welcomed different. And I don't remember what Jimmy Olsen looked like before, but his design fits right in. Speaking of Jimmy, I was watching this interview with the producer of My Adventures with Superman, released by Screen Rant Plus, and I found something I thought was kind of goofy, funny, At the bottom of the video, they have timestamps for sections, and at the very end, they started talking about representation in the new show and how important it was to them. The comedic part was that they asked about the villains before talking about the representation. So they labeled this section as being the villain section when talking about how important having Jimmy being a black character was to them, as if Black Jimmy was the supervillain we never saw coming. Now that we talked about all the goods the show has to offer, let's talk about some of the bad. Now, My Adventures of Superman was originally going to air on Cartoon Network, but was later changed to Adult Swim for whatever reason. This was a massive misstep, and it shows. You might be thinking, since it's on Adult Swim now, then that must mean it has more adult themes now, or maybe more adult visuals. Nope! When watching the first few episodes, it feels like a show made for Cartoon Network. It would fit perfectly into the mold and fill the Ben 10-sized hole Cartoon Network has neglected. So this show, which pictures people holding Nerf guns, is now airing on Adult Swim. It just doesn't feel right, nor does it really fit into what the show is all about. Let's compare the show with Samurai Jack. After a long period of the show being cancelled, they brought it back onto Adult Swim. This was perfect because the core audience who watched Samurai Jack were now adults. They also updated the visuals to compensate with the new rating, added blood and more mature themes for the series to explore. My Adventures with Superman is a show I would watch when I was a kid. It's just that simple. I don't want to harp on this transfer any longer since most people aren't actually using cable TV to notice the changes and are instead watching it online. With that out of the way, let's talk about the first episode. Now, this won't be a recounting of events. I will simply bring up some problems I had with it and then we can go from there. The first episode not only showed how well the characterizations of the main cast was, but also tried a little too hard to make Lois an integral part of the story. For example, at the end of the first episode, they had the bad guys hitting a button in order to start a bunch of scary robots. This makes no sense in the context of the story. The bad guys stole the robots from some organization, so why does it automatically know not to attack the people who activated it? Why does it know instantly that they should protect the bad guys? You can write this off as them being reprogrammed, but if that's the case, then why is the button that controls the robots on the shipping containers? Why can Lois just run up and turn the robots off? Why didn't they program the button only to work when the main bad guy presses the button, like a handprint scan? The whole concept of the first episode's climax makes no sense, and it really shatters the big Superman reveal scene. This all hinges on the fact that they needed Lois to be part of the hero gang and not associated with the common trope of damsel in distress. They wanted to distinguish her so much from her past incarnations that they clumsily slipped in this episode-shattering plot hole. I would love to reiterate once more, I love her character, I love Clark Kent, and I love Jimmy. I simply don't want the writers to be blindsided by bad storytelling simply so that they can give Jimmy and Lois their own hero moment. Another thing I would like to touch up on is the "you betrayed me" scene in the first episode. Lois met Jimmy and Clark like 5 hours ago and they still had the gall to write this scene in. They don't know each other. Why is Clark so surprised he was lied to? One more thing that becomes a big part of the story going forward is Clark and Lois's relationship. They push this as a main theme and it's just something that I'm not really fully down for. The one thing I'm afraid of happening, and it looks like it might be true, is that they hint at a relationship for 20 episodes and in the season finale they finally get together. The reason I believe it will be this kind of relationship is because of how they are playing it off. They hint at them getting together so freaking much that it's like they are dragging a bait right in front of the audience's faces and saying, just one more episode, maybe they'll admit their obvious feelings to each other then. It's not a relationship that they slowly build up, but one that they use to fuel their fandom. Let's talk about Slade really quickly. That's not Slade. Alright, moving on. Let's talk about the origins of Superman's powers, which was slightly showcased in episode 2. I think what they did in episode 2 was really well done. They made Clark's real father speak in a language that he doesn't understand. They made the spaceship mysterious and interesting, and they delivered the backstory in a quick and efficient way. One thing I think is stupid is that Clark's Superman outfit already had an S in it. I thought this would be written off as being the standard outfit from his space daddy, but his space daddy doesn't have an S on his chest. What makes this worse is that his mother gives him some tights and a belt to wear with his costume. What they should have done was make his mother try sewing the S onto the chest of the costume and having the S infused with it. This would, at the very least, give a reason why the S is there. Or, does the dead alien race still keep in touch with the news and know that Clark is referred to as Superman? I'm sure this will be referenced in the future and have some sort of explanation, but I will still find it dumb no matter how they write it off. My last complaint revolves around his powers. Why did he decide to hide them? Why is he hiding his powers for all these years, and why does he decide to help other people all of a sudden? It's like he saves Lois Lane one time and now he has to save people as an alter ego Superman in order to find out his past. I wish this was fleshed out a little bit better, including how he was able to live as a child with all these powers, but he still has trouble with his strength when he's an adult. You'd think he'd learn how to control his strength after living with it for what looks like over 10 years. Now, with all of my complaints out of the way, they did this show dirty. They created a show that will appeal to young boys and girls, advertised it on Adult Swim, and then locked it behind an HBO Max membership if the kids aren't allowed to watch Adult Swim. This is a perfect cartoon for the younger audience that was sold to the consumer as being an adult-oriented show. I have no doubt that this show will succeed, but their marketing should have pushed this out as a cartoon rather than an adult-only program. Because they've decided on advertising this as an adult program, I'm going to be holding the storytelling to a higher degree. Not only does the first episode fall short on that bar, but it also falls short in comparison to other incredible kids shows like Owl House, Amphibia, and Adventure Time. I don't want this show to fail. I have too many high hopes for how they fleshed out the main cast for me to want this show to fail. I hope this show succeeds and gives us incredibly deep and interesting plot lines. If anything, I hope the first episode of the series is its worst and the only place left to go from here is up. Now, thank you guys for coming and watching. Like, comment, subscribe, check out the second channel, and as always, my beautiful viewers, Johnny.